This is your before and after story. Southeastern College can help you prepare for a secure and fulfilling career in the growing healthcare field. We offer a wide range of careers to choose from, so whether you want to be a medical assistant, medical billing and coding specialist, nurse, surgical technologist, or another healthcare career, we've got you covered. Become a vital part of a healthcare team and make a real difference. Southeastern College, your future is bright. Visit sec.edu to get started.
It's not about you. It's about that person being educated about uniqueness, because it's about a simple reframe that encourages inclusion rather than unkindness.
G'day, I'm Debra Caldow. Welcome to the Red Giraffe Solutions Expanding Worlds podcast, where we aim to support you as you help your young person with additional needs plan for their future. A future where they're safe, secure, and live a rewarding and fulfilling life. From around the world, I share stories and I share solutions from people making this possible right now. I'm a parent of a young person with additional needs, so I understand the challenges. Many of the people I've interviewed on this podcast have already helped me design a better future for my daughter, and I hope that they might help you as well to imagine what's possible for your young person. This podcast is made possible by Red Giraffe Solutions, which is a project I'm proud to be part of, supporting families to build a better future for their children. We now have available at Red Giraffe Solutions an online course called Independent Cooking Made Easy. This is a new and unique approach we developed when we realised traditional cooking techniques and recipes were never going to enable our daughter to cook without some support or supervision. It's a safe, simple system that uses no more than 5 ingredients, has no weighing, cutting or chopping, and no lifting of heavy dishes. Each of the 16 recipes in the course includes a step-by-step video of our daughter making the meal, plus a visual recipe card. We developed this for our daughter to solve her challenges with cooking, and every recipe in the course she can and does genuinely cook for herself. You can find a link to the course in this episode's show notes. One of the most important roles that we have is to remind our children how amazing they are. I realised quite early on how important this message was for my youngest daughter, because it wasn't a message that she was hearing enough from other people around her. But I'll be honest, finding a way to convince my daughter that her additional needs didn't define her was difficult, especially in a world where labels make people feel comfortable and fitting in is something that most people aspire to do. So I was very happy to find out that there is a way to do this which empowers her to embrace who she is. And it really comes down to one word: uniqueness. In last week's episode with my guest Alison Thomas from Unique and Loved, Alison explained the power of embracing our own individual uniqueness. In this second part of my conversation with Alison, we delve deeper into why understanding our own uniqueness helps us not only understand ourselves better, but also helps us understand those around us and why they do what they do. But like I suspect many people, I still had some ideas around fitting in that impacts on my ability to really understand uniqueness. So I started off by addressing this issue with Alison. So let's hear more from her. I don't want to play devil's advocate either, but is the first question or the first thing that people say to you, but I just want to fit in?
Yeah, definitely. We talk a lot about conformity as well, because there's a really important place for conformity. People can feel safe, they can feel secure in that place. And I think fitting in, as long as it's true to yourself, is completely fine. For example, my eldest son has got long hair. And he often talks about, people say, oh, you shouldn't have long hair. And so he often says, oh, I want to cut my hair. And I say, absolutely fine, cut your hair. If you want to cut your hair, that's completely your choice. But are you doing it because you want to cut your hair, or are you doing it because other people are saying things? Because if it's the former and you want to do it for you, brilliant. But if you're doing it because you don't really want to, but you feel like you should, then that's not being true to you. So I think it's about encouraging them to be true. And if everybody's encouraged to be true, then everybody will be able to fit in. When I do the sessions with schools, I leave them with a pledge that encourages them to commit to understanding uniqueness. And it's about committing to understanding uniqueness when it comes to themselves and when it comes to other people. And I think bringing them back to those core points of uniqueness, it does reframe. I think the energy in the room, it just shifts slightly when there is that change in understanding. And so I do constantly talk about bringing it back and thinking about uniqueness. And that's why, to me, it's important that everybody understands it, because that's when we can all fit in by being ourselves, because we understand uniqueness. And when one of the things I say, actually, particularly to year 6 pupils who are going off to making the transition to secondary schools, I talk about the fact that they're going to go off to secondary school, and it's very likely that having left the safe primary school bubble, that there might be more chance that some children are not going to be as kind, and they might experience unkindness directed towards them. And I do say a tool that you can carry with you is knowing that when somebody is unkind, says unkindness to you about some attribute about yourself, whether it's your characteristic or a quality about yourself, when somebody is unkind to you about a characteristic about yourself, what is really powerful for you to know is it is nothing about you. The power is knowing that they don't understand uniqueness, because if they did, they wouldn't say it. So the power that you have is they might be saying it, but it's not about you. It's not about your quality that you need to change. It's not about your hair that you need to cut, or you need to be taller, or you need to, I don't know, whatever people are being unkind about. It's not about you. It's about that person being educated about uniqueness, because it's about a simple reframe that encourages inclusion rather than unkindness. Because there'll be things about people that we can't change, and it should never be about changing the things and the people, the characteristics and qualities that we have in order to fit in, unless we want to change them for ourselves or for our benefit. Yeah, that's a real kind of nugget that I give the young people that kind of gives them a bit of a boost. I think it needs to be reminded. We need to talk about this all the time, to remind kids about uniqueness all the time. I talk about uniqueness all the time, and I need to remind myself about my uniqueness all the time. So definitely children who are growing up need to be reminded of their uniqueness at any given opportunity, of the power of their uniqueness, rather than feeling like they need to fit.
So when you talk about the difference and uniqueness, can you just clarify what's the difference? But
yeah,
because I think as a parent of a young person with additional needs, one of the things I've always said is I believe that for her, the more visible she becomes, and more she does, and the more of a role model she is for other people who go to work, the more invisible she becomes, in the sense that people just don't notice that someone with additional needs is working in the hotel or whatever. So that sort of idea of difference, and I understand exactly what you're saying about uniqueness, and I get it, and I'm going to be studying my own uniqueness. But there is that sort of thing as a parent where you come back and think, actually, I want people not to notice my young person.
Oh my gosh, I absolutely hear what you're saying. I remember when Alistair was a baby, and I used to do the school run for my eldest child. I used to go to school with a friend who also had a baby of the same age. And another person at the school, used to approach me and say hello to Alistair, try and give him cuddles and kisses and high fives, and oh, isn't he wonderful? And just completely ignore my friend's baby who was the same age. I know that she was trying to say, her message to me was trying to be, I am so inclusive and I love the fact that you've got a child with additional needs. At the same time, I was exactly like you say, being like, if you supported my child with additional needs, you wouldn't kiss him, or you'd be kissing the other child as well. And I think that is a real battle, isn't it? We want our children to be supported, absolutely, but not to be made to be like a showpiece, or to be made to be like a tick box, or I'm supporting people with additional needs. How good am I? That kind of vibe. We're not tokenistic. That's really what we don't want. I do completely empathise and completely would love a future where Alistair is not seen, but at the same time, I want him to be seen. It's hard, isn't it, to be a parent with additional needs? You just want everything. How do I see that happening? Was that the question that you asked?
I wonder how you see that happening, but I'm just also interested in this idea that, as you say, people will think that they are being inclusive because they'll acknowledge your young person, when actually it's better that they just get on with their day and don't go. And there's a lot of that in the press about young person with additional needs gets a job, young person with additional needs goes to the supermarket by
Yeah.
themselves, which is absolutely
Yeah.
ridiculous from a point of view of the young
Yes.
person.
So that was your question, actually. And that to me is because like a difference is being highlighted. It isn't about your daughter being a unique individual who has got a job. It is your daughter who has additional needs who has got a job. And it is that difference about her that is highlighted and emphasized because it ticks boxes and it makes people feel good potentially. And so, yes, that's why it is about encouraging everybody, employers, anybody who will listen, to, instead of seeing that difference and seeing it's the tick box culture that we have generated, in fact we have created it, and there are huge benefits. For example, it might be the case that people with additional needs might not be being employed, for example, if we hadn't created this tick box scenario that we've got now. So I completely understand there has been a benefit to it, but at the same token, it has emphasized the differences that we see rather than encouraging people to see the whole qualities that individuals can bring to the table. For example, it might be that people believe that somebody's been employed because they've got additional needs, but actually they've probably been employed as well because they're excellent at customer service and they are incredibly kind and incredibly thoughtful and they are attentive and they want to make sure that they are doing the best that they possibly can. That's why they've been employed, because definitely somebody else with the additional needs would not have got the same job. It is about the fact that they are a unique individual as to why they're employed. So let's celebrate the fact that's why they've got the job. Let's not celebrate that they've got the job because they've got additional needs. And that's a big piece of learning that I think employers need to experience.
So when you go into, say, you talked about what you do with young people in schools. What about when you talk to adults? Because they're going to have fairly entrenched views of things like difference. Because I think I keep coming back to that because that seems to be what we talk about, difference. We talk about embracing difference. But actually what you're saying is that that's the opposite of what you want.
Yeah, I know. Sorry, I'm asking a lot, aren't I? I think, again, when I talk about conformity and I talk about the fact that we are encouraged to conform and we are encouraged not to be different from the moment we are born in every single thing that we do. And we are encouraged to see that there is a way to be and there is a way that is different. And that's how our brains are really wired. And I do talk about the fact that from the beginning of time, when we were fighting against saber-toothed tigers, it was incredibly important to recognize difference because that's how we survived. And so our brain is naturally developed and wired to recognize difference and be alert to it and fear it. It's natural and completely understandable as to how we as humans do operate in this way. But at the same time, it doesn't always generate a positive response because it generates fear and it generates othering, and we put people in boxes, and that's what draws the lines and brings the barriers up and creates exclusion. Whether we are deliberately doing it or whether we are subconsciously doing it, that is what draws the barriers. And so yes, it's quite a big task to unpick all of that and unframe all of that. But I do feel it can be like a light bulb moment for people, and it can be like, oh, it's a big reframe, but it's also something that people haven't considered before, which I feel it can be really refreshing. The information I'm giving them is very simple. I'm not giving them any rocket science or teaching them something that I've uncovered or invented. But at the same token, when I do the reveal about the reframe from difference to uniqueness, it is a big eye-opener and a big surprise. And I think particularly parents are very keen that their children get this. So when I talk to professionals, it's very much like my kids need to hear this, because I think they're very aware that we need to be doing this and thinking about this from an earlier age, because we've wasted a lot of time as adults having this potentially damaging understanding of difference. And so, yeah, they're passionate about wanting their kids to have it earlier so that they don't have that they can benefit themselves and they can benefit others.
So what are some of the practical strategies you give people to actually start to do that?
Firstly, when I talk about uniqueness and we talk about the qualities that come together to make us unique, what I find really interesting is that we don't actually spend any time considering what makes us who we are. And I am very passionate about the fact that we make decisions and judgments about ourselves and about others we make millions of them, but we don't spend any time considering what creates us as humans, or what makes us to be humans. We're happy taking the time to make judgments about people, but we're not happy to take the time to consider all the jigsaw pieces that come together. So the first step I always encourage people to do is work out what makes up a human. What are the characteristics and qualities that come together to make a human? And they can be, there are hundreds, from your eye colour, from whether you've got siblings or not, to your religion, there's hundreds. And so the first step I would take is have a look at that as a piece of work, and amaze yourself at that, the fact that you haven't ever considered, we haven't ever considered that. And then once we've done that, then consider all those factors for you. What are all those factors for you? Like, how has where you live impacted you? How has your education impacted you? How has the fact that your hair color impacted you? Like, what are all these answers to all these points for you? And think about them, like really genuinely consider them, because all of them have played a role in shaping you. It isn't just one thing that you did or one characteristic that you have felt. For example, I have anxiety, and that has dominated a lot of my thinking about myself. Whereas actually, when I started to really unpick on uniqueness, it was really important to notice that is actually, rather than dominating my life, it's a part of my huge life. And that has helped give me some perspective on my anxiety and helped me see it as a bigger part. So I would definitely encourage people to do that. And then I also encourage people to, as I've mentioned, anxiety, I encourage people to not only consider the parts that they like about themselves. So not only consider, I'm really friendly and I like making people laugh, and I like whatever music that you like. Don't only consider the nice bits, consider the bits that you consider to be flaws or bits that you don't necessarily love about yourself. And when I genuinely think that when you're able to openly and honestly consider those parts of yourself and see that they are parts of who you are. So I'll take my anxiety for an example. It is a big part. It is a part of who I am, but it does have a positive impact on me, as well as it being this thing that I hate about myself. It also has a positive impact on me in that I would not be the person I am now without it. So I need to, in some ways, be grateful that it's been a part of my life. I need to acknowledge that it's had an impact on shaping the person at who I am. And I think what is really important, when we acknowledge our flaws, it can give us the power to if we feel comfortable and able to do something about them in a really positive way. I think when we don't want to, again, just referring to my anxiety, when we don't consider it to be a part of ourselves, or we don't think about it, we just think about this negative thing, we're constantly trying to bat it away or hide it or knock it down. Whereas when we're really open and about the whole of ourselves, we're more able and more open to be able to be positive, to make positive steps to support ourselves with that area. For example, I can put things in place to help with my anxiety because I'm open to it and because I'm honest with it. So I think they would be the three kind of steps I would say initially that we really need to take to really help us understand ourselves, because I do think understanding our own uniqueness gives us a power to see other people's uniqueness. So it can, like you said about your daughter being naturally seen as having additional needs in the workplace. I think when you naturally see your own uniqueness, it genuinely means that you naturally see other people's uniqueness rather than highlighting the obvious difference that you might have previously seen. So that would be the first steps for me. But I would also massively encourage people to consider and reconsider this as often as they can. So it isn't just you've done it once and now I understand uniqueness and that's it for you and your life. It is genuinely keep revisiting it. The thing about uniqueness for ourselves is we all grow and we all develop, and that's the beauty of life. Nothing is fixed. We develop and we grow as people. So if I was to do the same activity in 5 years' time, my uniqueness would be different than it is now, and certainly it is than how it was 10 years ago. And so it's something that we constantly grow on. And I think being able to see that helps us understand that we aren't fixed beings and we can grow and we can develop, and however we're feeling now can change. And I think that's a really beautiful thing to be able to do and conceptualize, but it's important to keep doing it. But it's important to keep a mantra in your head. And even though I had the t-shirts, as I said, for Alistair herself and me at the beginning, like it says unique, love me, I genuinely say to myself those 3 words as a mantra regularly. Like doubt creeps in, or I question myself, or judgments creep in, and I constantly say those 3 words as a mantra to myself to bring me back on track, to help me reframe my thoughts about myself and other people where necessary. So I would really encourage a reminder. I think understanding your own uniqueness and reminding yourself of your uniqueness, and your family and your friends and whoever will listen, reminding of uniqueness is really powerful and important.
It's almost like everyone has to have the same message, though, isn't it, really? Because I was going to ask you a little bit more about the whole idea that even if I was to say I'm unique and you say you're unique and everybody else, a lot of people around me say it, what about those people who tell us that we're different? How does that knowing that you're unique protects the wrong word, but give you a shield against that? Because I think that's really important for young people with additional needs to understand their uniqueness, but also to have ways to make others not accept them as unique rather than as different.
Yeah, I completely understand. I think, as I said before, the tool being around for them personally, knowing that other people responding to them in a certain way is because of their lack of understanding of uniqueness. So knowing that as a tool, so knowing that it's not about me, it's about them. So that is a really strong, powerful tool. I'd really encourage that. And then secondly, I would genuinely, when people say to me about Alistair being different or Alistair not being normal, I say, what do you, and I say, what do you mean by that? Can you explain what you mean by that? And I find that they can't. They're using it, and as we've alluded to along the way, they're using language that they've just been used to using without really being sure of why they're using that language. And so, I think that they find that they trip themselves up. And I then explain my perspective, and either we can agree to disagree, but generally they're like, oh, okay, yeah, that's fine. That's the language that I'm going to use going forward. And this is particularly around the word normal, and I really push back on that. And that is something that is just part of our language and part of what we do. And I don't think people mean it when they say it, but that is something that I know I've changed quite a few people's minds about using that language. And it's not about me pushing back in a negative way. It's me understanding that generally people's intentions are positive. There are some people whose intentions aren't positive, but generally I always come at it that generally people's intentions are positive, and my job is not to be angry with them or tell them off for saying a certain thing. My role, I see it as just being able to give them my perspective, and they can either choose to take that on board, choose to go away and reflect on it, or choose to ignore it. That's their choice, really. But generally, I find because it's a new piece of information, they're willing to reflect, or they're willing to take it on board, because it's just a viewpoint that they've not seen before. And they're making choices and saying things because of how the world has taught them to be. And I would say probably without Alistair, would I be saying the same things? Would I be doing the same things? Probably. I don't know. I don't know. But he has given me an insight into the world that allows me to see things a very different way. And that I am hopefully using that power to share with as many people as I can, because he's given me a new perspective on my life and on life generally that I want to share with as many people that will listen, because it is only going to benefit them and other people.
Every conversation I've had on the podcast impacts my life and gives me new ideas, but I can honestly say that this one really got me thinking more deeply about words like difference and fitting in, and questioning the way in which we talk about celebrating our differences. Because I think if we could all embrace this idea of uniqueness and do what Alison says, which is understand that we're all unique human beings, then maybe many of the barriers that our children face would fall down. Because when we talk about barriers for our young people, more often the barriers aren't coming from them. They're coming from those around them, who mainly see difference But if everyone understands their own uniqueness, then automatically we share so much more in common. I just want to say thank you for taking the time to listen, and I hope that the stories and solutions shared on here help you as you support your young person to create their future. If you know anyone who would find the ideas useful, please share the podcast with them. To support the podcast, please consider finding out more about the Independent Cooking Made Easy online course. It's a safe, simple system that works. There are links to the course in the show notes. You can find me on Instagram and Facebook. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn at Debra Caldow. I'd love to have a conversation with you on any of the topics we all care about. Bye for now.